What are we talking about when we talk about play? Goofing off, daydreaming and make-believe, lost in the moment, roughhousing and chasing, dress up and pretending, watching your favorite team win or lose, wasting time and doing nothing. Play. I'm Stuart Brown, founder and president of the National Institute for Play. I've come to see play through the eyes of a medical doctor, psychiatrist, researcher, father and grandfather. Play is fundamental to who we are, and if you miss out on it, serious personal and big cultural consequences are the result. But the good news is that play's presence can be transforming. This program is designed to open new ways of seeing what play is all about, and to introduce a new emerging science of play. Play, as you will see, is not trivial. My interest in play, and more specifically the consequences of its absence, began on August 2, 1966, one day after Charles Whitman, a 25-year-old ex-Marine and University of Texas student, had committed the largest mass murder in U.S. history. I had been assigned to a commission to investigate this tragedy by John Connally, then governor of Texas, who himself had been wounded in the Kennedy assassination. He wanted to get to the bottom of Whitman's motivation and figure out why this seemingly normal honor student and Eagle Scout with a clean record could do such a thing from the top of the university tower. Our commission concluded some weeks later that the lifelong suppression of play was a significant factor in his motivation. His play had been suppressed by his overbearing, abusive, and very disturbed father. This prevented Charles from developing the normal capacity to deal with strong and conflicting emotions, which had been stirred by humiliating and stressful events for months prior to the killings. We concluded that missing out on play, at least for Whitman, was a devastating loss with tragic consequences. I conducted other studies of young murderers and other violent or antisocial men and confirmed that in their lives, play was also missing. In the many years since then, I've examined both the consequences of not playing as well as the many benefits that occur through healthy playtime. By taking detailed personal play histories from the neighbor next door or the Nobel laureate in the lab, as well as having watched many of our highly social animal cousins play in the wild, the conclusions from these observations are solid. Play is critical to human healthy development. When play is a regular part of our life throughout our life cycle, it transforms the quality of life. We are built to play and built through play. More recently, neuroscientists using the latest in imaging and other refined technologies are discovering that play science belongs as a major separate discipline. The play experts and scientists you are about to see are some of those brought together at Stanford University in 2008 to participate in the National Institute for Play's first conference on the state of play science. My friend and colleague Scott Eberle, creative director of the Strong National Museum of Play, is an eminent historian of play. He has developed how human play is not just something fun we do, but is an anciently evolved process.
Well, first of all, I think most people do get it. I think people do understand play is valuable, and they do notice it when it's missing. They know when they're overworked and frazzled, and they know what it costs them. They can tell when the kids are bouncing off the walls because they've been confined too long, and you know, we know these things out of our own experience and as parents, and if we have pets, we know if you coop them up, they'll go nuts for a while, and we get you know, the crankiness we observe in people who don't give themselves a break, and so on. So I really do think most people get it, but so we're partially the victims of our ambitions because the stories you hear about people in they're who have kindergartners who have gone to the dean of the local university and asking if it's time for a tour of the campus. I'm not making this up. These things happen. The ambitions we have for our kids often kill that playful spirit. And I think these ambitions that drive us and that drive the educational curricula are often at odds with healthy living. And of course, play is anathema to the people who think you only get ahead by keeping your nose to the grindstone.
But there are many cultural forces that keep our noses to the grindstone, that prevent play from doing its magical stuff for us all. Getting what play is crucial to transform education and to aid in the development of emotional competency.
I mentioned pleasure, and pleasure is very, very hard to talk about because it's something we experience, bodily and in our mind. But it's one of the things that drives and anchors the elements of play. Put it right in the middle of the 6 elements of play, and pleasure is our reward. It's the thing that attracts us to play. It's the thing that we look for, and also the benefits that we derive from play largely depend on play being pleasurable. Development also is easy to understand in your own personal developmental biography, the way we learn. Language, for example, we acquire our words, one new word every 90 minutes, and our permanent lifetime usable vocabulary is acquired through play. Learning to walk, balancing the structure, balancing the calves on the thighs on the knees and the feet and so on is a precarious and wonderful feat. I mean, puppies know how to walk when they're born, but we have to learn, and it takes us a year or a year and a half to do it. And all of these are fundamental to the things we assume about ourselves that make us human, and we do them all as play. So if you forget development, if you forget play and development, if you drill, you kill, as the saying goes, and if you work so hard to leave no child behind by keeping their nose to the grindstone, you'll leave a generation behind.
A growing base of information from human clinical and field observers is now being linked with the information from pioneering animal play observers who provide objective, hard animal play data. This partnership led to an emerging new discipline of play science. Leading the field of animal play researchers is Jaak Panksepp. Jaak has transformed our way of seeing play through his lifetime of research into animal play behavior. His accomplishments allow connections to be made between the joyous play of animals, how this enhances their brain and behavior, and ours.
We're looking for a solid scientific understanding what play is in the brain and what play does to the brain. And one cannot reach the conclusions before the science is finished. We can be confident there will be a lot of benefits at all levels of the organism, from muscles to mind. And our own research has been much more interested in the mind. Our basic question has been, what does it mean scientifically to have a basic feeling like joy or grief? But I think we have established a scientific paradigm where you can study these subtle aspects of mind. And the strategy is very similar to quantum physics, where you cannot study the quantum level directly. You have to study it indirectly. But we discovered that the kind of emotional actions that animals make naturally, the instinctual emotional behaviors, from anger to crying to joy, play, that those same circuits that generate the behavior generate the emotional feeling. All mammals have very similar circuits below the neocortex, very similar chemistries, almost identical chemistries. And if we can identify the circuits and chemistries that control the instinctual behavior, we have an answer to what controls the instinctual feeling. And we wanted to make a science of this, and we couldn't imagine making a science out of it without having solid animal models. So we accept the obvious that animals have emotional feelings, and we can finally understand the brain mechanisms, and we decided to pursue emotions in the brain that no one else had ever touched. And then we said, well, there must be something fundamental about the social principle that is in the arena of joy. What would it be? And the answer was obvious, that it must be playfulness. And there was not yet a science of play. A lot of people had described play, but no one had tried to analyze it in a really scientific, experimental way. So we decided to go with a good old laboratory rat. And we said, well, how do you get them to play in front of you? And the answer seemed pretty obvious. You make them hungry for play by putting them alone for a while. And lo and behold, if you put the young ones together, they played like the dickens immediately, very robustly. And we were hooked. And we wanted to rapidly get into the brain and work out the brain mechanisms. So along with a series of enthusiastic students, we initially analyzed just the physical dynamics of play, and then eventually had a postdoc, Brian Knutson, who said, is there play sound? And I said, well, nothing that we can hear with our ears. And he was a little perhaps despondent, but I said, not to worry, because we have to listen at a very high register, and if you're interested, we'll get the equipment and you can listen in and see if there's play sounds. And he discovered this play sound immediately.
Jeff Burdorf was the last postdoctoral student in Jaak's program at Bowling Green State University. He is now a research professor in the Falk Institute at Northwestern University, where he is advancing the neuroscience of animal play behavior, laughing rats and all.
When we first started, we would watch the animals play with each other and see that they would vocalize. And then when we were watching them play, we would see that they would touch each other on the back of the neck, and then they would vocalize. And then Jaak got the idea to tickle them. And again, that was 10 years ago. And my career pretty much has been ever since, pretty much in two steps. One, to figure out, does that vocalization really relate to a positive emotional state? And that took about a half dozen studies. And now that we've more or less convinced ourselves that it relates to a positive emotional state, now comes the more interesting question. What are the chemicals that control those vocalizations? I make animals experience positive affective states through tickling and play, and then I look at their brain and I look at which chemicals are released. And then we can find chemicals that are causally related to this positive emotional state. Now we can go from looking at one or two chemicals to looking at thousands at a time, at great sensitivity. So we could take a bit of blood or a blood sample, and we can measure. We have the sensitivity with our biochemical assays to measure 10,000 different chemicals in that sample. It seems clear to most scientists that study this that the function of positive affect, smiling and laughter, is to form social bonds and coordinate pro-social behavior. I smile and laugh, you smile and laugh, and then we have fun together. There's other things in our culture that are more reinforcing. The classic example for the people that study positive affect in humans is money. People are always motivated to make more money, and it turns out that there's not much of a relationship between how much money you make and how happy you are. Not nearly as much as the quality of your social interactions. Studies have shown that people who have low positive emotionality, don't experience much joy in life, have approximately a 5 to 10 year shorter life expectancy than your average person. So this is a greater risk factor than even smoking or obesity.
So one of our big questions is, can we make a nervous system happier early on in life that will have lifelong benefits as a prophylaxis for depression, as perhaps reducing the likelihood of ADHD in childhood, because many children cannot use these powerful energies, and they're so powerful that if in a classroom you're among playmates and you can't play, the first motivation in the child's mind is, let's play. And if one child begins that activity in a classroom, they will be seen as disruptive, not following rules, and they will be given medications that reduce play. Every one of these medications for ADHD is a play-reducing drug. So it's a wide open question. It changes the brain in many ways, and we are doing a great cultural experiment and without having even the results in animals. We've given very young animals lots of play, and they're much better regulated early in adult life.
We now know that play regulates mild to moderate symptoms of ADHD. The implications of Jaak's discoveries of what active play does for the brains of restless 8-year-old boys and the rest of us is revolutionary.
You know, the level of complexity that play produces in the brain is Mother Nature's way of designing a highly sophisticated social brain. And most of the social brain is not in the genes, it's in the environment and how a child blends with the social environment. A child that doesn't have enough joyous play will blend differently than one that does. And if Mother Nature already gave us this powerful urge, we better use it very effectively. You know, children have to be able to learn to negotiate the negative situations in a positive way. So I think play allows you those moments in life. If sensitive adults realize that the aim of play is also to bring the child to the very edge of their knowledge, and then an intelligent adult gives them instructions at that point as to what our expectations are. And that's why we need play sanctuaries, the way that Plato described them, where you bring the children together and you allow them to play by themselves, playing the games they want to play, not what we want to give them. That allows them creative use of their brain, their mind. It provides full joy as opposed to partial joy. So, you know, if you're in an eager, euphoric, anticipatory state, you can learn all kinds of connections in the physical world. If you're in a play state, you can learn all kinds of connections in the social world.
Professor and Department Chairperson of Psychology at Gettysburg University, Steve Siviy was one of Jaak's first graduate students at Bowling Green. He is now in the forefront of basic animal play research and has contributed widely to an understanding of what play does for the brain of social mammals. And, as you will see, his thoughts about play take him well beyond the laboratory.
What really caught my attention was not only did he say, here's these rats playing, but then he said, you know, no one's doing this. There is nobody in our field looking at play behavior. And as a young graduate student, I looked at that and said, wow, I see opportunity. You know, one of the first studies Jaak and I ever did was we food-deprived animals and found that they didn't play. It's obvious. If you're hungry, you don't play. If your primary needs are not met, you don't play. And there are some good studies that have been done with rats that have looked at what happens if you don't let a rat play. And the biggest problems that they see in these rats is they don't, when they interact with another rat that they don't know, who may be a bigger rat, a dominant rat, they don't respond to them in the proper way. They don't respond in a way that makes sense in rat world, in rat communication. They, rather than if a rat goes up against a big rat, it's not in their interest to kind of try to beat him up. It's in their interest to submit a little bit, say, okay, I understand you're the big rat, please don't beat me up, okay? That's how rats talk to each other. If you don't let a rat play when they're young, they don't do that. They don't do that the same way. They don't, so as a result, they're probably more likely to instigate being attacked, being aggressed upon.
One of the findings that came out of our studies of young, violent, antisocial men was that they were all seriously deficient in experiencing any normal rough and tumble play. So later, when they were faced with having to master complex and often stressful adult social interactions, particularly the experience of being humiliated, they reverted to destructive violence, just like the play-deficient rats that Steve described.
All these trends in education and in how kids are disciplined and how schools are run, and I just do see this disturbing trend of keeping a lid on kids, keeping them from really expressing what their brain is essentially hardwired to express. And I'm sure Jaak has said a lot about this because he's been one of the most vocal proponents of play in this sense. And it's very disturbing because you see this and you know that a lot of the problems some of these kids are having is probably because they have no outlet. They have no way to do this. So I think that maybe by understanding the neurobiology of it and saying, look, there is a science of play, that these brains are, our brains are wired to do this, so we really should let our kids do it. And by keeping them when they're 7 or 8 years old, sitting at a chair in a seat for hours on end to pass tests so that the school can look good is probably not doing them any good, and is probably in the long run not doing the school any good, nor is it doing society any good.
Joe Frost is Emeritus Professor of Education from the University of Texas and the preeminent playground play researcher in the U.S. He has recently completed a book, A History of Children's Play and Play Environments. He sees with clear eyes the current play crisis as historically unprecedented.
Diminution of play has just happened basically during the last 30 or 40 years. When we vacated the wilderness, we began to have a different generation of parents responsible for children who have different ideas about hovering over their kids, about the deletion of recess. My students and I began to understand 20, 30 years ago that play was deteriorating. 40% of American schools, IPA, International Play Association, says, are considering deleting recess. I see this everywhere I go. 40,000 schools have already deleted a recess, a la Psychology Today. I see it everywhere I go. And then we have, within the schools, the high-stakes testing. In my estimation, this is probably having a greater influence on play deprivation in schools, public schools, where it's effective, than any other single factor. And then there are additional factors causing play deprivation, like lawsuits, coupled with standards, playground safety standards, which have grown from 20, 30 pages over the last 15 or so years to 50, 60, 70 pages at the present time. Illogical, inconsistent in many respects, out of character with state safety regulations. And then we have kids, as Richard Louv says, the disappearance of nature. It's not that nature has disappeared, it's that we don't let them go.
And this loss of play has serious health implications which we cannot and must not allow to occur. The nationwide obesity epidemic, the increase in childhood and adolescent depression, and other declining childhood public health measures are part of our national blindness to childhood play deprivation.
Just recently, the state of Texas tested 2.6 million school children with the Cooper fitness test and found that with each passing grade, the fitness levels went down. So we've been studying for the past 3 or 4 years, in particular, obese kids or overweight kids, kids who are not fit physically. And I've gotten to know these kids, and we watch them, observe them, talk to them, have journals with them. And obesity tends to turn back on itself and be one of the causes of play deprivation. They can't play. They can't do the tasks. They can't play the chase games over challenging equipment. They can't run like the other kids. And they begin to become depressed. And they sit around when you see them in private places with their head between their hands. But that's one of our big tasks, to avoid, prevent, ameliorate correct the problems related to play deprivation. That is, informing people, and hopefully the kind of conference that Stuart Brown has called here will certainly help us to do that, because he's an eminent researcher, his work has influence, and the people who are here are very influential people here at a great university, one of the greatest, Stanford. And I believe that the kind of work that's going on here is the kind of work that's sorely needed to help people understand. The media is even picking up on it now. And we see new organizations and groups being formed. Kaboom, to build playgrounds for kids. The Voice of Play, to convince people that play is important.
Joan Abrahamson is a policymaker, National Institute for Play board member, president of the Jonas Salk Foundation, a MacArthur Fellow, an artist and singer, one who understands the big picture of the importance of play.
The National Institute for Play is here to explore the scientific aspects of play and to reveal them so that they can then be accepted by the public, and it can be understood that play is essential to human development and human life. That it is a deep need and a natural function, much the same way that sleep is. So at one point, I think people thought, oh, sleep, that's nice, but it's not really related to my daily life. Everyone knows now that there can be a sleep deficit. And if there's a sleep deficit, a person's not going to function very well. It's much the same, we believe, with a play deficit. We don't just want to say that because people could say, well, that can't be true. Look at all that humanity has done with very little play. But in fact, as you look at it both on the physical level and on the creativity process level, we believe that play is an essential part of human life. We think that looking to the animal kingdom is important for what is inherent in cubs and young animals. We think that watching the human developmental life cycle is important to see when things shift and when it's somehow dropped as for external or internal reasons. And we think that in the future, part of any health consultation will be a play profile, and that will help the individual and medical professionals understand how to cure people, how to keep them free of disease, how to make them stronger. And play's relevance to health is going to be the reason that play is, again, embraced by our society. I think that's why we need a National Institute for Play. It's not just that people are going to say, oh, my quality of life will be better. And they'll say, well, yeah, but do I need that? Maybe I'll just go out and buy something. I'll feel better. This is something that can help the individual become at ease and in touch with him or herself. It can help relationships sustain and that kind of sense of delight that people have when they meet each other. They sense something in common. There's no reason that can't go on playfully, and we see that in relationships of healthy elders that goes on. Same thing goes for learning. If children are at ease, I believe that they can learn more easily, and learning can be a type of play. I think that discovery is a kind of play. I'm on the board of National Geographic. I mean, why do people like that? Because it's new discovery of whether it's climbing a mountain or whether it's a new civilization. It's a thing about pushing limits as well, and how to push our own limits to widen our world, to find our unique abilities, to bring out the best in each other. We have to somehow shift the paradigm so that by a playful, open, interactive human society, we can lift some of the darkness that we impose on ourselves and explore what we have to bring to each other.
The Stanford meeting from which these interviews have been edited are only glimpses of what is a flood of new important information about play and play science. These truths about our human nature need to enter our lives at all stages and ages. How can you participate more actively? The National Institute for Play website offers more information. I urge you to join us and become an Institute member and an active part of play transformation. We provide a newsletter, teleconferences with our advisors, and more.